Today we're going to take a look at this guy here, Geralt Yrden. So, everyone's probably familiar with him at this point, but just to go over it, 11 provisions for 2 power, so the ability has to be very powerful, and it resets the power of all units in a row. The best use for this, as you probably guessed, is just you reset the power of a whole bunch of boosted units on an opponent's row. All the units lose all their power, and it's a huge swing and you win the game. The other option is you can reset your own units. This is not as common, but in a self-damage type deck, you can do it in a deck where the opponent does a lot of damage to you. So you're going up against White Frost would be an example. A bunch of your stuff just gets ticked down to like 1 or 2 over time by the Frost. You could reset them all with Geralt Yrden and get a big value swing that way. But you're not going to include them in your deck for that. Normally you want to include them in your deck to reset the opponent's units. And that is kind of, well, not kind of, it's pretty meta dependent. So if people are playing a lot of boost cards, Geralt Yrden becomes very good. If they're not, it becomes very poor. But there are some decks that just cannot win a round if you have Geralt Yrden in your hand. Vi, for example, is one that's very difficult to win a round with because they rely completely on the boost from consuming Vi's. This is especially true if they have a Slizzard and you let it live and it just keeps consuming the Vi every turn. They'll almost certainly split up the points, but you can move stuff if you have movement into the row and reset them all. Well, even resetting half of Vi's boost is usually enough to win. So, against decks like that, he's very good. Against other consumed decks, he's also very good. And against anything that relies on mass boosting, he's very powerful. The thing is, mass boosting like that isn't as common. And one of the only decks that really frequently does that we currently see is Assimilate. Assimilate gets a lot of Assimilate boosts over the course of the game. And usually they have a fair amount of those. The issue there being is that they run Illusionist, and Illusionist could bring back 1 strength copies you could reset and boost by accident, and they can also create Geralt Yrden to play it on you, and in that case, hopefully you didn't have anything boosted. One strong consideration here we talk about before we get too much into Geralt Yrden decks and things is, if we take a look here at the Geralt cards, there's one we want to compare him to, that's Igni. So, they both function very similarly, they both affect only 1 row. One of them resets, and Igni destroys the highest power unit with 35 or more power, or has the initiative destroy the highest power units on a row with 20 or more. So, they both have the ability to affect multiple units. Igni can destroy, and they have to be the same power for him to destroy them, and Yrden resets them all. Destroying is better, but the reset doesn't require them to be the same power, so it's much more consistent. Igni sees a lot more play, at least in my experience, because there isn't a lot of boosting. You see Igni pretty often nowadays, because say you're against anything that really has engines, or for example, I was just playing soldiers the other day. This isn't a great deck, but we'll talk about it. And all the soldiers are 4 power, and then use Igni them all. Stuff like that, you can use Igni for that, whereas Yrden won't be able to reset them because they weren't boosted. So it comes down to meta dependence. And then the question is, if you're going to have Igni or Yrden, Yrden does not require the 20 power, which is nice, and doesn't have the initiative, which would mean you'd actually have to have 35 power if you needed to do something to get the initiative. So he is very good. I think part of the reason we don't see him more is because Igni's more popular, and people aren't boosting a lot right now. Usually the boost cards, if you look at the popular decks right now, Assimilate has boosts. The Syndicate decks have Savala, King of Beggars most of the time. King of Beggars has the boost, and they have some fee cards which boost. And he's pretty good against those decks that boost really high. But a lot of their value comes from bounties and damaging you, so usually only reset like 1 unit or 2 units. Firesworn is pretty popular. They have a lot of boosts. He's actually really good there, especially if they play all the Fall Knights in a row with Cyrus, since they don't have much of a choice to get the first one in that row, and then they probably want to keep playing in that same row. Really good there. But against the other decks that are pretty popular, White Frost is pretty popular. You can reset your own guys there, but that's not usually great because they'll probably be dead. And if not, the reset's usually not super valuable. And then there's Skellige decks, right? They don't boost too much, just get tempo value. At least those are the decks I run to. And then the Elf Swarm, he's really poor versus. They have the Isengrim +1 boost on a row, but that's not really worth running a Yrden for. You could reset after they Vernaciel all of your guys, but that's not really going to work out most of the time. It won't heal enough for it to really be worth it because it'll be spread across both of your rows. So I think that Yrden's current issue is just that the decks that are popular aren't really weak to him. And then against decks with a really big boosted finisher, like Gord, for example, whereas Gord He's in here somewhere. Herald Gord boosts himself by whatever special cards you've played. Up to 12, and usually he's really big and boosted. Siege is another popular deck, by the way, that Yrden does nothing against. Except for he can reset a couple of Siege engines that boost themselves, and the Character Marine. So he's not too bad there, because he's playing into a row, but he doesn't win you the round like you need against those decks. So then, if you have a card like Yrden, which can reset a whole row, why would you don't want to just be resetting one card, right? Why would I want to reset just one card as a finisher when I can Heatwave it? I'll just banish it, or I can Invocation if I'm playing Nilfgaard, or I can Geralt Professionally, or Geralt Vervia. You get the idea. But none of that really takes away the fact that Geralt Yrden, if you have him, some decks just automatically lose the game. And I should mention at this point here, at Geralt Yrden, there's a secret extra line of text here. It doesn't say. There's always like a 1% chance, whatever deck you're playing, no matter how much it's supposed to be devotion, just pulls out a Geralt Yrden and resets you. There's like a special text here that at least like once a week, you just see a random Geralt Yrden just spawn into someone's deck to kill you. It has to be here somewhere because it happens too much. No, he is very good. The issue is just right now, not a lot of people are playing decks that Yrden's weak to. And if they're not weak to him, he plays for 2. There's actually a pretty similar comparison in here. If we look at what's her, where's the lady who spawns the artifact? Is she a 10 now? I think she's a 10 now. Where is she? You. It's similar here. She is incredibly powerful if the opponent has an artifact, especially in Nilfgaard, where if it's a scenario, you can trigger it. But if they don't have anything weak to it, she plays for 3 value, and it's really, really bad. Usually you'll lose that round, because that's too low of tempo. Yrden's pretty similar. If they're not weak to it, it's just so bad that it's just... You have to have a way to make this work for your deck. Nilfgaard can do this with some enemy boosting cards. You can combo this with Yennefer of Venderberg, appropriately enough, and boost all the units by 2, then reset the opponent's units on a row. That's a thing you can do, which is interesting for sure. I actually really like Yennefer of Venderberg in Soldiers, by the way. I think I'll make a Soldiers video this week. But she's really good there, and then you can reset if you need to. But Yrden really wants you to have some say into the opponent's losing points on it, right? Because if the opponent's not losing points, then he's a 2-point card, and that's not awesome. The other thing to mention here is at 11 provisions, you have to justify him over another removal card or a big tempo card. So let's just take a look at a deck, for example. Let's look at Self Wound, because it's a deck where you could use the reset your own unit thing. You have to justify fitting Geralt Yrden in here over something like a consistency card, like the Create Ornamency, over a Heat Wave. Potentially you run both, but at that point you have so many provisions in here that, for example, this deck you can't really afford to put him into. But sometimes you have a deck where you have empty high provision slots. For example, take a look here. And you have a lot of flexibility. So right here we have flexibility of Yennefer and Kay here as a combo here. Fun combo. But you could take these out for a Geralt Yrden. And if you did that, you'd have the reset ability. It's just hard to fit him in decks, is my experience. Because you really want to have him in a deck where you can take advantage of his ability by making options for you. So, for example, Self Wound, if you can make it so that the opponent... If the opponent doesn't have anything to reset, you can reset your own guys for value. Right? That's good. That's something you want to have in the deck. Nilfgaard, you can boost the opponent's units, so even if they're not boosted, you can get some value from the Yrden. It's worth mentioning, though, some that leader abilities do actually boost, and against those, this is really good. Particularly against some of the cards that... Hand Buff, by the way, really hates this. Really hates Yrden. And so does the Arrakis Swarm deck, where you swarm everything. Firesworn Swarms gets more value as well, but you can just reset the Fallen Knights. So there's a couple ways to kind of make this work. We mentioned a couple. You can boost the opponent's units because you're playing Nilfgaard, or use Yennefer. You can damage your own units as a backup option for a reset, kind of like when you play Spores in a deck. If your deck has self-damage cards, you can Spores as a reset option, or use it to heal your own card. Kind of a lot of the ways very similar. And you can also rely on movement. So if you have more movement in your deck, you can move a bunch of things that are boosted into a row, reset them all, and Geralt Yrden becomes very good. He used to be much more common. I think right now the problem is just the meta's not right for him. People are playing lots of control, just lots of control. And that's what it comes down to. Lots of control, lots of point slam, not much boosting. So, that being said, when boost is popular, Geralt Yrden is very, very strong. And there's still ways to make him work even without it. We mentioned Yennefer Venderberg being probably the most interesting one. If you're swarming, you can play Yennefer in your deck and then a Yrden as a reset after Yennefer. It's pretty fun. But yeah, I think Yrden's really interesting. One of my friends always mentions that he wishes there was a reveal card option. Because sometimes if your opponent just would reveal a Geralt Yrden in their hand at the start of round 3, so you could quit the game and not have to keep playing because you know that's lost. It's kind of true. Some decks really can't beat a round 3 Yrden. And as long as that's true, he has a place in the game for sure. I just think he's interesting. My biggest concern right now for Yrden is just that Igni, in a lot of ways, is just better. But when people play more boost cards, then Yrden becomes better. It's an interesting trade-off, these two. One of them always seems a little bit better than the other one, depending on the meta, and that's probably how it should be. They're both tech cards. What do you guys think about Geralt Yrden? Do you play him? You think he's too strong? Think he's too weak? Think it's just meta dependence like I do? Let me know. Let me know what cards you want to see next time. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.